Hey Jen, I'm just going to hide your camera really quick. We're just gonna pull up a 2-up on the backside and make sure that Kimber and Renee look great. Oh, no, other way. Oh. And they can see themselves, so. Great. Should be good. Perfect, thank you.
morning. It's almost time to get started with our general session. We'll be with you in about 2 minutes.
Hi, Kimber. How are you today?
I'm awesome. How are you doing?
I am so incredibly excited. Here we find ourselves at this month's Inman Connect Now. Oh my goodness. I'm so proud to be sharing this time with you today, Kimber.
I love it. I love that Inman does this, right? That we have the ability to connect with folks across the industry and getting to know new people. So I'm excited for this chance to co-host this morning's general session with you.
As am I, and I totally agree. Connect Now has been one of the key differentiators in our business over the last year. I am incredibly grateful for this Inman community and super excited for today, Kimber.
Me too. And so I love it. Folks are going to be able to stay right in this window. You are in the right spot for all of our general sessions. So you can interact in the chat. Renee and I would love to hear from you. Tell us where you're from. Tell us what you're looking forward to hearing about today. This is our opportunity to interact with each other. And as Renee said, build up our Inman community.
And today wouldn't be possible without a few awesome Inman sponsors. Let's kick it off by saying a big, huge thank you to Agent Fire, Boomtown, Curbio, and Kimber. You have a couple as well.
I do. You couldn't make it happen with also Fly Homes and Revive. So there's always ways to learn more about the sponsors and what they offer. And so I think it's awesome that they allow us to bring this content for such a low cost for many people that are joining today. So thank you to all of our sponsors.
Thank you to our awesome sponsors. And without further ado, let's kick off today's Connect Now with the one and only Brad Inman and Pete Flint, where they will be sharing with us real estate digitization. How far will this go?
Greetings, everybody in the Inman community. It's so good to be with you today at Connect Now. This is part of our ongoing series throughout the year of having spectacular speakers and interviews with leaders in the industry, practitioners, people on the street, people doing deals, doing business, all leading up to the end of October in Las Vegas for Live Connect is going to happen in Las Vegas. Today, I'm super excited. I think it's like our 16th anniversary of doing an interview with Pete Flint, who many of you know, all of you know, founder of Trulia, also now a venture capitalist who really understands what's going on in our world of real estate. And now he's a step away from it all. He's not running a company anymore and hasn't been for about 7 years, I guess, in the actual online real estate space. So he has a lot of great insight. Welcome, Pete.
Thanks, Brad. So good to be here. I'm sorry we're not there in I'm not there in person with you guys. So fingers crossed, stuff will open up.
Yeah, well, hopefully we get you to Vegas when we're all live. So Pete, let's pretend you're from the UK, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, been here from the UK, now a US citizen, but been here for
So I'll play Oprah and you play Prince Harry. Nah. Let's jump into our world of real estate here. I think one of the things, our title here is, how far will digitalization go? And I think when I ask that question for our audience, how far will it go with the consumer? How far with the industry generally, with companies, and the everyday realtor? There's a really good article this weekend in the New York Times about robotics and how it would change the accounting world, where that controller and that accountant that takes care of our finances is slowly being replaced by all of these applications and software. So I think survival is one person's question out there in the audience, but also let's talk first about the consumer, because you're in the middle of this with some of your investments. What can the consumer expect from all of this innovation around digitizing real estate?
Well, I mean, just take a step back for a moment. It's I think one of the questions we're all asking ourselves, asking our families, like, when are we going to go back to normal? When are things going to go back to normal? And the reality is, I think that we're never going to go back to normal in terms of just the world that we lived in 12, 18 months ago. That world has changed forever. And what has changed is that every single thing in our lives has become digitized. This conversation is digital. Our school and our kids' education is digital. And clearly the real estate transaction and that process is becoming digital. So I think, so how far will the digital transformation go? It will absolutely transform. It will accelerate just the way that e-commerce has been accelerated. We're getting more and more things delivered in the mail, and the same with the digital transaction. That's been in the works for years, right? You know, we've talked about it for years. The research process has been digitized, but now the transaction process is going to be digitized. And of course, that change is scary, but it's going to be awesome. It's going to be awesome because consumers, you know, that they're, first of all, it's going to take out the friction. It's going to take out the sort of endless copying of information from one area to another area. They're gonna get to a position of confidence, of simplicity, take out that friction, which is way overdue. And I think for many people in the industry, it's going to be beneficial as well. It's going to increase efficiency, primarily for agents, but also I think it's going to be less fun. Like, I mean, just like work today is less fun. I would love to hang out with you and in New York or Las Vegas. Like, this is less fun, right? I like to do a closing dinner with my investments and like, okay, what are we going to build? And I think that is, you know, it's a sort of process of efficiency and digitization, and that's going to be hard for some folks.
Yeah, you know, it's interesting. I wrote a kind of sentimental article last week about Wall Street taking over, and kind of think of Wall Street cold and callous, you know, not really about people. And we always talk about the real estate transaction being kind of a horrible experience, but in fact, it's centered around finding a new home. So there's a lot of fun, you know. It's like if people have fun shopping, it's similar, like, but you're shopping for a home, and you share that with people that are trying to help you in a very positive way, and you get to interact with those people, and they bring you down to earth, and if they have emotional intelligence, they're helping you navigate the emotions. And it's not just dollars and cents and square footage and you know, me, Mr. Promotion of automation and digitization, I'm suddenly looking at kind of the sentimental side of what's lost here. Are we going to lose something in this that technologists never seem to really care about?
Well, I think it's interesting. I mean, you bring up the Wall Street point, and there's obviously been this sort of flood of IPOs, this flood of capital. When kind of we first met, like there were no kind of like sort of investors in the audience, and now I'm sure there's a lot of people looking at it, and a lot of IPOs, a lot of money. And I think there is just this, in my time at Truly, we took it public. It's like, and in that environment, there is this enormous pressure, and there will be enormous pressure on these leaders to grow and to increase profits. And you think of the family businesses that are real estate brokers all across the country. It's like that does not fit with that environment where you've got efficiency driving margin and sort of an execution driving growth. So we will lose it. I think I guess to break down some of the changes, like first of all, I think the sort of the lower half of the market in terms of price point will change dramatically.
By price, so something worth 200,000 versus worth 10 million.
Exactly. So I think those. I mean,
why is that? Why would that happen?
Well, there's just less profit and less. There's less sort of. There's more opportunity for automation. There's less sort of emotional detachment. They're more kind of financial decisions. And of course, I think realtors will be involved in that, but that will be the first to go. And you kind of look at that in the same way as sort of
more homogeneous too, right? I mean, that's the idea.
It's more homogeneous. You see, that's where the iBuyers have been focused. And I kind of, it's not a perfect analogy, but it's in the same way that stock trading. Like investment bankers are doing just fine. But the sort of like the local stockbroker is non-existent, and so the innovation happens at the bottom.
So real estate, I think you may have inferred real estate agents may go. Let's just use Zillow as an example. They get into iBuying. They tell everybody they're going to use realtors. Don't worry, they're going to be in the transaction. Now suddenly they're moving very quickly to Zillow employees, as opposed to the typical independent contractor, free-floating realtor with a personality, and that is that part, or is that evidence right there that, and they're focused on that lower end of the market. Is that where it's headed? Is that something more like Redfin and less like Keller Williams?
Well, I suspect that's where the bottom half, the bottom half of the market is where you'll start to see more and more of that kind of impersonal nature. And so I think that, I mean, and that's just, I sort of feel is what's going to be driven by the market, unfortunately. And so that's where I see a lot of the changes happening. And at the kind of like the higher end of the market, I think the opportunity there is for agents to think of themselves like, management consultants or investment bankers, strategic experts to help people through this more complex. And there's more opportunity in that. So I see it evolving there. I think though that, all this capital coming in, it will drive an efficiency within this process, which, it's going to be different. But I think those that embrace it are going to be like, wow, now I can spend a lot more time with my clients and a lot less time doing paperwork, a lot less time doing kind of sending basic information over because that will be automated, a lot less time on the sort of the less fun stuff, I think, of real estate. So I think those that embrace automation will kind of realize that they'll be freed up and to do these more kind of like strategic and more interesting pieces of work.
Let's look at the players in the industry. We kind of know what Redfin's doing. We know what Zillow's doing. Then you've got companies like Realogy, Keller Williams, trying to innovate against these companies that are so well capitalized to do so many things so quickly, to dominate markets. What does that look like in the future? How do those companies, can they get in the game, or can they just rely on the traditional role they play and hope to be successful, particularly when, as you say, the depersonalization of the industry is underway?
Well, I think that the reality today is it's much easier for a tech company to become a real estate company than it is for a traditional real estate company to become a tech company. This is not just incredibly expensive to hire all those engineers and stitch together these pieces of software and build these proprietary platforms, but it's just the DNA. You look at the founders of these companies, whether it's Eric Wu or Rich Barton, like these guys, don't really know about kind of the sort of emotional process of selling and buying houses. They are absolutely technologists at their heart. And so they are running these organizations purely like tech companies and then adding the real estate component. And that's very different from the traditional folks who I think haven't got the kind of DNA, but probably B, haven't got the capital to invest in these areas. And so I think
go ahead. The misstep with KW, that was an example, I guess, where they tried to become a tech company and they found it far more difficult than was they ever imagined.
Exactly. It's so difficult. It's so hard to build this technology. And just think about it. I've in many conversations with new online real estate companies, and like it's incredibly complex. Not only is this like you've got the sort of the features, but you also got regulatory environment, you've got security, you've got to deal with all these participants, you've got this workflow, you've got local regulations. It's incredibly complex to solve these problems. And so, and that's just really hard for kind of these big companies to navigate and be successful.
Let's move further into the value chain in terms of participants. I talked again in this column last week, this sentimentality over that small broker owner, like I equated it to vinyl and, bookstores and small bookstores, and almost that experience of knowing your broker owner, running into him or her at a coffee shop, something feels lost there. But they seem to me with this investment, and what do you think, threatened?
Well, I think you're going to see this, I guess if I was to roll the industry forward 5 years or so, I think the way it's going to evolve is that there's going to be these monolithic companies, the Zillows and Redfins and Open Doors, who are kind of these tech companies that are, I'd say fairly impersonal, but incredibly efficient at what they do. And then at the other end of the spectrum, I do see these, the local experts, that is the kind of heart and soul of US real estate, where they are the neighborhood expert. They do know what's going on. They understand, this side of the street, the other side of the street. They know the neighbors. I think they will be okay, but it's these small regional brokers which are gonna have more challenges because they're not big enough to invest in the same way that Zillow and others can, and that's not their DNA to do that. But they're too big to fit into these pre-existing platforms or to jettison all the kind of the cost and infrastructure because they've built this for decades. And so it's much like you see in the media industry or retailing industry. Retailers don't have the scale and supply chain or brand to be successful. So I see that's going to be. So I see this sort of separation, and it's another analogy is within the e-commerce industry, which is possibly the most mature of these sort of digital industries in the US, where you've got these monolithic companies, the Amazon and Walmart.com, which are just like terrific and really efficient, and we love the packages when they come in less than a day. And then you've got companies like Shopify and maybe Etsy, which are basically enabling the little guy to compete at the same level as these monoliths, and that's great. So it's actually great for these individuals that are creating these unique products to serve an audience. They can access those.
Who's a Shopify in real estate? Do we have one? Who's like built around technology, but like passionate about supporting that crowd of these independent local realtors? Is there an opportunity there, or is that already?
Well, at NFX, we're investing in those types of companies that are helping sort of enable, whether it's Greg and Carey for Mozilla at Tomo, whether it's Shivel at Ribbon, and a number of other companies.
Pete, repeat those slowly, just so our audience captures them, the names, because some are new names there for me.
So Tomo, which is started by Greg Schwartz, who the audience will know, I'm sure, from Zillow.
But we don't know
And
that
it's,
product yet, do we? What that product
no,
is?
it's not launched yet. And then similarly, which is more on the financing side of things. And then also there's Ribbon, which is on the sort of the key close side of things. And so and there's a number of other companies that are helping the real estate agents to be successful. I think though that, you know, unlike the e-commerce industry, which is way less regulated, there's not going to be a single company that really dominates this platform. There's so much complexity, so many local regulations and individual complexities. You're going to see a whole suite of companies that are going to be really successful, enable real estate agents to kind of sit down with their clients and have coffee and kind of talk through the details, and help them, you know, in many ways compete against these very large corporations.
What it's interesting with what you said, Pete, that a company like Compass, funded like Eric Wu at scale, right? But took what you've talked about, I think, in this conversation, is a threatened breed within the industry, a traditional broker owner model like NRT, which has dragged down the earnings of Realogy because of office space and other issues. And they're going to go public here soon, I assume next week or the week after. Talk about technology. I guess they have technology. Some of it's in the S1, but still a little nebulous when I read it. Is that just a contrary, you know, out of the box? How does that fit in here? And are there more companies like that? Is that the upper end of the market where they seem to be focused? Is that how they succeed?
Well, I mean, Compass has had its naysayers sort of since the beginning. And I do think I don't know the company super well, but I do think that their heart is in technology. They started very much as a tech organization. Then they went into kind of more traditional, and then they're moving back. I mean, and Wall Street, back in the day when Truly was going public in 2012, there were no publicly traded online real estate or publicly traded real estate brokerages. Wall Street doesn't really like it because they are low margin, highly cyclical, depending on interest rates and buying patterns, and then highly seasonal. So Wall Street is like, kind of doesn't know how to deal with it. I think though that the companies of today, with technology, with scale, adding a level of efficiency, and vertically integrating, so they're able to become a pretty interesting, profitable business at scale. And so I think they will do just great, and I think they'll be fine. But I think that is the area of the market which they're focused on, is I think going to be way more resilient to technology, and it looks like they're investing in technology to help them to be successful.
Yeah, it seems like Wall Street takes your point of view. They value Realogy at what, a billion plus, and Zillow at 40 billion. But the revenue and a high margin business Realogy has, billions of dollars in revenue and a very high margin, better margins than anybody. So they've already, it seems, well, obviously they've concluded Realogy's not in the future and Zillow is. I mean, and that's why I'm struggling with what might happen with Compass, but I guess Wall Street will tell us very soon. Let's end this. We got a couple minutes. And I want to thank you so much. I'm so grateful to you. And I know a big part of our audience, entrepreneurs, always looked up to you and watched your success and cheered you on. Some people made it in the industry like you did, and they didn't cheer them on, but you were always cheered on because you're always there for the entrepreneurs. And I'm watching your blogs now and all the stuff you're writing about founders and what's the DNA of a successful founder. And folks, if you're not reading Pete, whether you're in real estate as a broker, an agent, or an entrepreneur, read what Pete's doing, because what they're talking about and what he's writing about, I think really, you write the ingredients for a successful entrepreneur. But let's get down to the core of the Inman audience, and that's the everyday hardworking realtor. Are realtors the last to go here? And we've kind of talked around it a little bit, but that local agent that helps most people in the transaction, no one seems to be running from them from the public point of view. Are they the last to go? Are robots going to take over?
Well, I think they, in many ways they will be the last to go, but I think they have very little to fear, in the sense that you look at the other participants in the ecosystem, I often say that if something can be commoditized, it will be commoditized. And I look at the kind of financing and title and escrow and paperwork and middle management and all these sort of like components of the real estate industry that will get digitized and that will get somewhat commoditized. But that if you're providing value as an agent, which cannot be commoditized, local knowledge, relationship building, then I think you're going to be fine. And all this money coming in is enabling this industry to be modernized. Like there's so many tools that are available today that have never been possible before. And so, yes, I think real estate agents and realtors will be the last to go, but I think they have nothing to fear. And in the near term, that's going to be, beyond kind of my working lifetime anyway, when that may change.
And let's head to the Queen. Your family back in the UK, do they love the Queen?
I'm astounded that anyone cares about all this stuff. Like, I'm astounded. It's sort of like great for TV, but I'm just astounded that anyone cares. Yes, they love the Queen, but can we just move on, please?
Absolutely. I just said
anyway. I just want us to, I think they've left the country, and so, but it's, now that politics is a bit boring these days, at least there's something interesting on TV.
The media is always going to throw something in. Hey, Pete, you were fantastic, and thank you so much for always contributing to Inman. And we'll see you around the bend when some of this settles down, I hope, and keep up the good work. You've helped the industry so much and helped the real estate process so much.
Oh, thank you, Brad. Inman was a kind of like the sort of spark that kind of helped my career in a huge way. So I'm always grateful and delighted to join you on here and hopefully on stage at some point.
Definitely. Las Vegas. Hey, gang, I'd like to check out here. This is Brad Inman with Pete Flint. We'll have Pete back as soon as we can, hopefully live. We got a great day here today for you. Enjoy all these great speakers and tune into all of the digital events coming up over the next 6 months, anchored by Connect Live in Las Vegas. And thanks to the Inman team who, again, put together a great program, and over and out.
Woo, Renee, that was like an action-packed little segment with Pete.
Okay, so drop a comment in below if we need more Brad and Pete in our world. I was feverishly writing down notes. The two of them together are incredible.
I love that Brad always has a way of just like going in with the questions and just asking the things that everybody really wants to talk about at home. So we certainly got it in the last 20 minutes.
We sure did. And it started with Pete reminding us all that, quote, we're never going back to normal. What is normal? And what does that mean for all of us? And is that scary? Or could that mean new growth in new ways?
I know. And it's interesting because, I feel like Brad kind of teased that we're going back in person. We're going to be together in Vegas. And yet you wonder in the future, will there just always be a hybrid of this sort of virtual and in person that we'll start to see as those of us, right, that are more comfortable come back out and get together? I know you and I are like we will be there. And we'll just see that world from now on. Yeah.
We sure will. And, I wanted to touch on some of the comments that had been dropped in. Sabrina Brown from Fresno, California, she dropped in a reminder, tech is a tool, not a replacement for what we do as realtors. So very true.
I love it. And he said that, right? Pete at the end is like, look, is it going to be disruptive? Absolutely. Is it already? Absolutely. Is it going to replace the role that the realtor plays and the relationship, the fiduciary that we have? I loved when he talked about like just the idea that it gives you time back, that we had to spend less time in theory behind these computers and actually being able to have conversations with our clients and really spend more time on the things that really matter most.
I agree with you. I loved Pete's insight about efficiencies being brought into our industry in the right way. I mean, he mentioned efficiencies 4 times, and he was talking about the companies of tomorrow are the companies that will give us all the ability to scale, have more efficiencies. And he said, already have the tech moving in the right direction. I'm fired up with that session. Loved, loved, loved it.
I did too. You know, it gave me pause, right? I mean, both of us are sort of with more of the real estate leading brokerages when he said it's going to be easier for the technology companies to go into real estate than it is the traditional real estate companies to go into tech. And while we might see, I think, a lot of our larger brokerage companies struggling with that, I would argue that the technology companies haven't figured it out yet, or they would have already done it. Like, what we do is unique, and it is belly to belly. And I think that's going to be, you know, as we watch that evolve, my money's on the real estate companies.
Well, as it is with all tech and the marriage between tech and realtors, at the end of the day, the sustainable agent is tomorrow is the agent who understands the marriage between those two worlds. We as realtors are a critical component to that offering into the marketplace. So continue to learn both elements in your business.
Absolutely. And I think I'd love to hear people's thoughts on that. You can feel free to chat. You know, we're checking the chat. So if you've got an opinion and you think like you agree, you don't agree, how are you seeing that in your business? This is a good time to have that be a really live and robust discussion. And it's going to continue on as we go through the morning and unpack some of the other thoughts in some of our sessions going through this morning.
You know where I believe it'll continue on as well is, you said, Brad mentioned upcoming events. Wait a minute, we're going to be in Vegas before you know it. So be sure to check out inman.com/events for all upcoming dates and details, including more Inman Connect Now, as well as upcoming in real life in the fall in Vegas. I'm going to be there.
I'm going to be there a few days early, just so we're clear. We're going to be there on time, ready to go.
I'll meet you there, Kimber.
I love it. And we've got some more opportunities with Inman Connect Now, because I love what we're bringing. I mean, literally, we have an ad that's coming on later this morning that is real time, was just added to the schedule last night, because it's really keeping us up to date on the trends and conversations that are happening in our industry. And when you think about the real estate agent as really needing to be the knowledgeable person, understanding what's happening, like the numbers of real estate, being that economist of choice for your clients, this is a way to make sure that you're staying up to date on the minute by minute most relevant data impacting our industry.
It sure is. Once again, the Inman community for the win, coming together to collaborate and be cutting edge, right? Well, because it's important, we continuously remind ourselves is the power is within this tribe we have here at Inman community. I'm so incredibly grateful.
Absolutely. And I think that's a way, both on the Facebook pages, to just stay connected and up to date. I think sometimes we can easily get into our tribes and silos around brokerages, but this creates that opportunity to have those conversations. What's happening in the tech space? We can't just pretend like that isn't influencing the way that we do business and the future of our industry. So being able to be at the table, having the conversation is amazing. So let's jump into our very next session. So we've got Clelia up with Mike Meter. And before they join us, we have a couple of members of that fabulous Inman community who are going to share a lucky moment. Get it tomorrow, right? A lucky moment from their real estate business. So we're going to kick it off with Amber.
Hey, it's Amber Salmon in Des Moines, Iowa, and the luckiest I've been in real estate is when I gave an outgoing referral to a friend in Minnesota who was looking for a high-end realtor for a friend of hers, and that actually didn't pan out, but lo and behold, 2 years later, we had a little of what we call mailbox money, and all of a sudden I opened my mailbox and there was a check for a referral for that girl bought a $4 million property on Lake Minnetonka in Minnesota, and I got a referral for it and wasn't expecting it, but I'll call that lucky.
Mike, it's such a pleasure to be here chatting with you. I have to say, I've been watching what you've been doing with Century 21 in the past couple of years, but you and I haven't had an opportunity to chat yet. So really, really excited to have you here.
Yeah, Carly, I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah. I want to jump right in and talk about the fact that last spring you came on Brad's podcast and you said at that time that you really saw real estate agents and kind of our industry as a whole as essential workers. Do you still think that's true? And let's just jump in with talking about kind of what you've seen happen over the course of the last 6 to 9 months.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a great question. First and foremost, absolutely. I think not only are we essential workers, but I think if you look at what the real estate industry has provided for their local communities and really their local economies over the last 12 months, right? I told Brad this story, but life is happening out there. People are unfortunately dying. They're divorcing. They're having children. They're switching careers, even right in the middle of a pandemic. I told the story of a community that was building and needed a hospital, and they needed like 50 to 60 nurses moving into their town, and they needed to find a place for those folks to live. So we were absolutely essential. I think you saw some states jump to it late in the game, but what we did as real estate professionals, again, not just for this industry, but for the economy as a whole, I think is really something that we should be heralding. We're 20% of the GDP in this country, and every home sold in a local community means anywhere from $50,000 to $100,000 back into that local community from a spend standpoint. So yes, we were essential then. We continue to be essential. I think if we've proven anything, it's how resilient we are as an industry, and really how innovative we were able to get in the face of adversity. So it was great to see everybody come together. I commend Brad and the Inman community for really stepping up and putting on those podcasts and, for free, quite candidly, and getting the word out there and getting focus and inspiration out to folks. But I think it kept our industries moving forward in the right direction.
Yeah, it's amazing to think that it was exactly a year ago that this all started. So, I think it's been a really interesting year to be running a real estate company, right?
That's for sure.
I've said that I feel like COVID has above all been an accelerant to trends that were already there. It's been accelerating the need for a more digital approach to the transaction. It's been accelerating the need, I think, for an even deeper relationship between the brokerage and the agents. So can you talk to me a little bit about how you've been thinking about this opportunity as a leader and how it's aligned with some of the changes you already had underway at Century 21?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think you're exactly right. We always talk about the real estate industry as, kind of far behind in the technology continuum compared to other industries that are out there, right? And there's a whole host of reasons for that. I think that are, a lot of us already know. But, from a technology standpoint, I think this pushed us forward as an industry in a really positive way. Whether, it was as simple as, using this to do more transactions, or the fact that we're now, literally doing business and meeting virtually like we are right here. I mean, I can't even tell you how many real estate professionals that I know had to teach clients how to use Zoom or Teams or Google Meets or, you name it, in order to have this type of interaction and not meet face-to-face in an office or at a house. From a Century 21 perspective, we stepped out there immediately and literally in a couple of weeks went from kind of beta and concept to execution on our virtual open house. You look at all the states that are now accepting remote online notarization, right? That's something we hadn't heard of before, all this took place. But again, I think it put us in a place where we had to get out of our comfort zone from a technology perspective and really pushed us into, the current state. And I think what happened, Chloe, ultimately is that it became a better experience for the consumer. And I don't think we can ever look back now. And I know Brad is a big proponent of, making sure that we're doing things that, make the consumer experience better. And that lines up ultimately with our mission and our vision from a brand perspective. I think that technology will continue to make our professionals more efficient, more effective. But at the end of the day, it's really the consumer who's going to speak on and vote really with their pocketbook and with, they're using our professionals on whether or not we're doing a good job from a technology standpoint.
Yeah. And so tell me a little bit about what your technology vision is for Century 21. Now, you guys are in such an interesting position given your reach, but also the nature of being more of a franchise business.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, I think if anything, the last few years, the last year in general has taught us that, we have to adapt and we have to move quickly, right? And that the consumer demand is there, and we're going to have to listen to what that is. And I think it's forced us to all really look at our businesses in different ways. So for me, from a technology standpoint, and I hear so many different competitors out there and other, companies, quite candidly, looking at, end-to-end solutions, or, the thing that they believe that will ultimately help their agents be more successful. And I got to tell you, from a lot of building and from a lot of testing and from a lot of mistakes, quite candidly, and I think it's happened a lot in our industry, I don't necessarily know that I would consider technology a differentiator per se. I think it absolutely has to be there, like I said, to be able to make our folks more efficient and in order to meet the consumer where they want to be met. But ultimately, I think it's literally, if you look at our folks, right? And I was just on a demonstration of a platform that they have today. If you look at our real estate agents or you look at our brokers, they're using anywhere from 6 to 12 different technologies to run our business. And what I've learned from my experience is that the real issue that we have as an industry is that, in Seattle versus in Portland, depending on what market you're in, those technologies don't necessarily talk to one another. And quite candidly, your CRM or your listings feed or your leads engine or your transaction manager or your back office, they don't necessarily talk to each other. So our vision and what we're trying to build is more of an open architecture type platform where each one of these disparate parts can speak to each other throughout the transaction. And I know agents in a specific brokerage that use 2 completely different sets of technologies because that's what's right for their business, or one top agent doesn't like the fact that another top agent uses a product and wants to differentiate themselves with something else. And so I think it's our job as real estate industry really to somehow weave together platforms that are being used in the industry for the consumer so that they can all talk to each other, be seamless. And I think that's the way that we will be able to provide the best experience for our real estate agents to make them more effective.
Yeah, it's really interesting because I think at this point everyone is sort of coming around to acknowledging that what we need is less PC products and more of an end-to-end platform. But I think there's some different approaches. Some people are coming to market saying, we're going to own that platform and you come to us and you get our platform. And some people are saying, we're going to plug into different things. And then some people are saying, we're going to create a marketplace. And I think what I'm hearing you saying is that you want to build enough of an architecture that people can plug what they like in and that it can have more of a seamless experience. Is that right?
Yes, absolutely. And what I've learned, and look, you when we were at, in-person meetings and events, right? When you would walk up and down the Inman trade room floor, which is probably one of the showcases for technology in our industry, or the NAR trade room floor. The truth of the matter is there are so many different products and vendors out there. And quite candidly, they change from year to year. They get better from year to year. And by the time you implement one, all of a sudden you have a competitor or version 2.0 that's come out that's even better. And so I don't think we can get stuck standing still and create this end-to-end platform because, to your point, yes, there's always going to be something new. There's always going to be something more exciting. There's always going to be something better that, again, ultimately will service the consumer better, that we're going to have to be able to plug into that experience without disrupting the rest of our platform. So yes, you're absolutely right.
Yeah. And, Keller Williams just said they were going to stop development on their tech platform, or they were basically going to stop new development for, I think, a couple of months so that they could go back and kind of fix all the bugs that existed. And I'm curious for you guys, how are you approaching actually building out this sort of architecture? Like, are you bringing engineers in-house? Are you, competing in that way? And how's that a pivot for you from what you were doing before?
Yeah, I mean, the ability when you look at Century 21 as part of the Realogy parent company, that's one of the benefits that we do have, right? We actually can scale our technology and our technology spend and our data and our analytics over, a brokerage and a bunch of other brands, which is the exciting part about being part of that company. But we have obviously developers in-house. We have developers out of house. We've purchased big products in the past, as you guys have known and learned lessons from doing so. So I think we look at our approach as, look, there are core elements to what we need to do to, one, run, as you said, a franchise product, but two, make our brokers able to run their businesses more effectively, which in turn means that the agents have to have products and solutions that they can ultimately use on the street to help service that consumer, make the consumer experience even better. So I look at it as multiple different levels. And again, that's where I say, look, we're never going to be able to boil the ocean and have all these different levels of services and platforms and products that we invent by ourselves and be able to efficiently run our companies. That's where we've got to go to the experts like, SkySlope as an example, right? They're excellent at, the back end of the transaction and doing all that stuff. Leave it to them. Let the people who are already using them, which happens to be a large amount of our affiliates, let them plug in so that when they do, they don't have to run data from 20 different sources or do dual entry or all those other things. So, I mean, we kind of use the analogy of a dresser, right? You have this big dresser that you have in your bedroom, and each one of them has something different, whether it's your sock drawer, your t-shirt drawer, or what have you. Whatever you like to use that's going to make you most effective in your local marketplace and maybe differentiate your business in the local market, you can stick into that dresser drawer, and we will take the dresser and allow everything to talk to one another so that it's a complete and holistic ecosystem versus these disparate parts that I think you find in the industry right now.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I think the pushback, the trade-off would be that you're giving people a lot more freedom, but that also means that there's less of this sort of like Century 21 solution, right? How have you thought about that trade-off? I mean, certainly, Compass is about to go public. Compass's big push has been that it's all ours. How do you feel like you compete in the market with someone who's saying like you need a tech solution that sort of belongs to you to sell both to agents if you're recruiting and to consumers?
Yeah, like I said, I mean, my experience, and I know Compass has been at this a while, and I'm not ultimately familiar with their product or, quite candidly, some of the other technology solutions from the other brands that are out there. What I do know is that we've learned our lessons as a 50-plus-year-old brand. We've been circulating technology in and out of our affiliate base, and as I said, it will be ultimately really, really difficult to get every single agent and every single broker in every single local market to use every single piece of technology you have. And I do think that folks might learn that lesson, maybe the hard way, maybe from, like we did over many, many years of, buying technology and integrating technology and building our own technology. But I really believe in the concept that we're using. We got a lot of really smart people at Realogy and inside of Century 21 who are making sure, with our agents' help. Like one thing I will say this is clearly everything that we do, we start to build for agents by agents. And in fact, I made mention of one of the products that we're putting out from a Century 21 perspective, hopefully in the next month, that was literally built with the agents who brought us the concept and now, kind of using them to build it out, get a feedback loop and hopefully execute here in the coming, weeks.
Yeah. So, you mentioned that this is the 50th anniversary of the Century 21 brand. So I think it's an exciting year for you guys. And I believe that Century 21 is actually the most recognizable brand in real estate, right? Haven't there been some surveys that have, and, the other thing I'm really curious for you is, what sort of advantages you feel like that offers at this point, and B, the tension that with what I see as this emerging trend around almost like agent first branding. So, like the blank team or this blank star agent. And And how are you thinking about those two different things?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's an amazing question and probably a really good one. And I think, look, when we were first started 50 years ago in Southern California by Art Bartlett and Marsh Fisher, the industry was in a different place. And, I call us the original disruptor. I kind of joke about it, right? We were the first company to weave and galvanize a bunch of entrepreneurs in the real estate industry in different communities across this country, put them under a common name, under a common look, under common marketing, and be able to exploit that and gain, as you said earlier, by literally placing franchises in every single, NFL secondary and tertiary city across America. For 22 years now, we have an amazing name with consumers, right? Voted, as you said, most recognized, most respected. And I think that was for a different time. I think as we move forward, and I say this all the time, Chloe, is that literally we are defined, the Century 21 brand is defined by literally every single agent who owns and holds our business card in the local market. That's who Century 21 is. It's funny because I saw Brad's piece, literally, I think it's about a week ago today, talking about, is Wall Street taking over real estate? And I'd say, certainly for Century 21, while we might look and feel like a Wall Street company because of this big name that sits under a big corporate parent, we couldn't be any closer to what Brad described there, which is that direct interaction and interface with the owner who is so responsible for what happens in that shop and with their agents and the experience that the consumer has, and that any consumer who walks into a Century 21 office can literally get the owner at their desk in order to talk about what's happening in the community and the marketplace, and to take responsibility and accountability for the real estate process. So, I do think that the Century 21 name and brand offers what I would call the best of both worlds. You have this big feel where you have a platform that's global in nature, 85 countries, 13,000 offices. And I say the best thing about the brand is the people, because we share so much, and whether it's best practice or masterminding to make everybody more successful, but you still literally have that local entrepreneur feel where you can get very locally connected at that agent level. So I do think there's an importance to what you said in making people recognize how local and how agent-centric our industry is moving, and how local and agent-centric this business really is.
Yeah, it's a really interesting dichotomy of, I think an increasing significance of national and international connection, but also a almost recommitment to the significance of the local agent as that centrality of the local knowledge. So to riff on that and to end us on sort of a feel-good note, can you tell me, the most amazing story you've heard about a Century 21 agent helping a customer during the pandemic or engaging with their community during this time?
Yeah, I mean, we have so many. It's tough to actually pick. We just awarded what we call our Hall of Fame agents. It's a combination of both production as well as giving back to the community. We just picked two fabulous agents that literally give back like crazy amounts of money, time, energy, and effort to the local community. But I think one of the craziest stories that I heard was a story of a gal, Iva Suarez, down in Florida, who literally in April, because of the pandemic and things being shut down, and the fact that folks couldn't even get married back then, if you remember what it was like a year ago, things were literally shut down. She literally held an impromptu wedding at her office and married a couple so that they could qualify for their mortgage and close on their home that very same day. So, when you talk about the importance of an agent in the transaction, to go back to your original question, that's why I believe that the agent is so ultimately important, and that we as real estate professionals will never be disintermediated by technology or anything in between, because of those so many steps and that huge emotional and financial connection that the purchase of a home means in today's United States society and economy. So I think that's a really cool one. And by the way, we also gave back another $2.5 million to our philanthropic partner, Easter Seals, which, if you look at the real estate community, I believe there's no other industry that gives more back to their local communities literally with money and with their blood, sweat, and tears. So, it's just some exciting stuff. And I think you can point to so many examples of people who stepped up across this industry over the last 12 months.
Yeah, I love that as a place to end. Well, Mike, it's a pleasure to talk to you. Looking forward to continuing the conversation and catching up again soon.
Thanks for your time, Thalia. Pleasure.
Success Assurance from Boomtown. Acting as an extension of your team, our trained lead concierges will respond to your leads 24/7 in as little as 90 seconds and nurture them for up to a year. Follow the conversations live and chime in whenever you want. You'll be notified of every qualification, and your lead concierge can even schedule appointments for you. And Success Assurance isn't just one concierge. It's a symphony of trained professionals engaging your leads around the clock. So start turning what ifs into done deals with Success Assurance from Boomtown.
Mike Meadler reminding us yet again that tech continues to make our roles as realtors more efficient. Coming up next, we are very excited to welcome VJ Williams, Wilson Leong, and Adelina Rotar talking where teams go from here.
Hi, everybody. So I believe the future of real estate is teams. And that says a lot because I run 8 Keller Williams brokerages. My name's Via Williams, and I'm the Director of Growth for Ben Kinney Companies. And what that means in our world is I lead 8 Keller Williams franchises in Western Washington for Ben Kinney Companies. But I think it says a lot that I think the future of real estate is teams. And so today, I see a couple things. I see a couple trends. As brokerage margins are shrinking, I see teams margins increasing. As brokerages are finding a harder and harder time trying to find the right fit for agents and consumers, teams are nimble. They're able to grow very fast. They were able to pivot very fast through COVID, and they don't take a lot of capital to start up, right? So as I've been observing this in my own brokerages and on the national stage, I've really seen 2 trends emerge with teams. One of them is the emergence of the super team. You know, we are not immune to consolidation that's happening in other industries. It's happening in our industry as well. And I'm seeing this emergence of the very large super teams. Ben Kinney team is one of them. Ben Kinney and Chris Suarez merged their empires and created the Place Network, and they're now in 55 different locations around the United States. The other trend that I'm seeing are these small, tight, geographically focused niche teams that offer superb customer service to their local geographical area. So as such, I invited 2 panelists to represent each of those and just kind of dive into where we see teams going and what we see the trends on teams as being. I have Adelina Rotar, who's the Texas Region Expansion Partner for the Place Network. And Adelina has been with Ben Kinney for about 5 years and has grown one of the largest team empires that I've seen in a region. She now runs a number of Ben Kinney and Place teams in Texas. Wilson Leong is our second guest, and Wilson runs Own Real Estate Group, which is a super awesome niched team in the Bay Area. They're just south of San Francisco in the peninsula, Millbrae, Burlingame, and that whole area. And I've known Wilson for quite a long time, and I love what he's building and what he's doing. And I felt that both of them brought each perspective to the table. So welcome, Adelina and Wilson. Are you guys ready to just dive right in?
Let's go.
All right. Well, let's just, I think we just jump right in. Are teams going to grow to be a bigger force in real estate, or are teams going away? Where do you guys see teams going? And do you think that they're going to be a bigger and bigger force as we move forward? Or do you think that, you know, they're going to shrink and that the solo agent's going to prevail?
I'll go ahead and get started. I think teams are here to stay. I think they're only going to increase in market share. And the reason I think that is businesses that we call teams are highly service oriented, right? And they provide that end-to-end process and experience for consumers. And they're also super focused simultaneously creating more value to the agent while making a large profit, right? So I think they're going to continue to gain ground. And I think it's going to be through a model of specialists. I think it's going to be operational specialists, technology specialists, sales specialists, and marketing specialists.
What about you, Wilson? What do you think? Are teams growing or are they disappearing?
I 100% agree with Adelina. They're going to continue to grow. And if you think about how to get started in this industry, there is a bit of a lack of community, especially if everyone's meeting remotely. So teams just have a little bit more influence. They've or have already established their brands. They already have a book of business. They have vendor relationships that are already established. All of that's going to continue to grow, in the influence, I believe, will continue to grow as well. So for each respective team out there, as long as they're customer focused.
Well, yeah, I mean, we're in an era right now where the consumer can press a button on their phone and a car can be at their house in 10 minutes. Groceries can be there in an hour. The expectations of the consumer are growing by the day. And you have to ask yourself, how can you deliver that speed and that high quality of service, right? And I agree. I think teams are the way to do it. So let's talk about how teams are going to grow. What models are going to thrive? And do you guys see any models that you think are going to die? Wilson, let's stay on you on this.
Yeah, and maybe we can clarify when you're saying team models or brokerage models, specifically team
models.
Right?
Team models.
Just going off what Adelina had mentioned previously, I think a team of specialists is going to do and outperform and systematically deliver results compared to an individual. And I think it's going to be harder and harder for an individual to be able to provide that. So I do believe that, the teams are going to continue to provide the value to the consumer, which ultimately is the most important person in any transaction.
So Wilson, before we move on to Adelina, you asked me a question. You said teams or brokerages. I mean, are brokerages dead? Is a team going to replace the brokerage? What are your thoughts on that?
I think you brought up a really good point earlier where I did see a trend that over the last 10 years of growth in terms of the market, that the margins that brokerages have behind the scenes, the profits are getting less and less. There's could be multiple reasons why. However, there are a lot of different brokerage models out there. I am no expert in one model or another, but I just make my observations. And I could really categorize them in two. And a mentor of mine had shared, you're either a company that's growing based on capital deployment, where you're buying contracts out, buying agents out, and obviously they join your company, you have some stipulations in there, or you're actually an innovative company that your company is investing in tools and systems and ways to improve the lives of the agents. And ultimately that hopefully translates as well to the consumer experience. So when I think about capital deployment, how does that capital or how does that improve the client experience, which is one of the most important things for us as agents we think about. Maybe that's why it goes back to the question of, are profit margins becoming less and less for more so traditional brokerages, because they're agent focused. They're focused on how can the agent improve and or make more money, or however the splits work, right? But ultimately, I think the agent is the one providing the value to the consumer, and how can we improve that experience for the consumer, whether it's on the team side or the brokerage side. So just some thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately brokerages are B2B and a team is B2C. Very, very good point. Adelina, what models do you see thriving? I get you're a little biased, but what models do you see thriving and dying?
Yeah, I mean, I think in any market, there's different models can coexist and will always coexist. And yet I think that the model that will thrive and that will provide the highest level of service to the consumer will be those models who are flexible. And what I mean by that is a model that is both going to provide a consumer-centric and an agent-centric value proposition. And the way I explain it to my team is the model that can marry the technology of tomorrow to create ease of process for the consumer with that heartfelt level of service, right, that we think about, yesteryear, to deliver that level of advocacy that consumers need. I think that's where it's going. And I think brokerages are important because they are the platform for these teams to scale that level of service that they are going for.
Well, I love that you said that because obviously, I run brokerages. And so I agree, by no means do I think the brokerage is dead. I thought that sounded provocative though when I asked it. But brokerages need to understand how to work with teams because they're not going away. Adelina, I want to, I guess, follow up. I'm not going to say push back, but I want to say follow up. Everything you said, I could argue an individual solo agent could do. So what makes a team the model that that needs to be used going forward?
Yeah, I think I agree with you that you will have solo practitioners and also smaller teams and bigger teams, both delivering a unique value proposition. Here's what I see, what it looks like to me. For the same amount of money, consumers can have 10 experts helping them with all aspects of the transaction, right? Logistically speaking, it's just difficult to have a single person facilitate that. I think the consumer experience is continuing to evolve and the markets are continuing to see rapid appreciation. I think when you have a team that offers the consumer multiple resources within the same model, right? And I'll give you an example. The ability for a team to make those relevant and necessary and quick changes instantly, right, to the market in real time. I think that I go online and I see, on Facebook, agents are going back and forth trying to figure out what's happening. And I think the very best teams right now are creating those opportunities for the real estate agent to focus on the consumer, and they're focusing on training and development of these agents, whereas an individual agent is probably getting more of a canned approach, corporate training approach that doesn't differentiate quick enough and doesn't pivot quick enough to the market of today. And it costs the consumer, I think.
Yeah. Wilson, what's the downfall of a team? What's a negative?
That's a great question. I think the focus on different things other than servicing the client is going to be the downfall of the team. So if you're focused on, let's say, recruiting to the team, yet you don't hold standards or good values to service the client, that's going to be a detriment. So I think as a team leader and also as a team member, or even if it's just a solo agent, the focus should always be, how can I best serve the consumer? How can I make this experience the best? And I think going off of what Adelina was talking about, a group of specialists will always have a little bit better information, have more repetition, just like a doctor, a surgeon that goes through surgery once a year versus 100 times a year, because they have a strong supporting cast to take care of the rest of the things. I think as long as the focus is on the consumer experience and the results of the consumer buying and selling successfully, that's what really matters. So when there's conversations about other things, whether it's stock options, whether sometimes it's revenue that the agent makes, yes, I could make more revenue, but how can I pour that back into my business to improve the consumer experience? So that's what I think about.
Adelina, can consumers get confused on a team that they don't actually know who they're working with or who they're talking to or who's ultimately responsible? Are there any downfalls
I think
in that level?
Yeah, I think that's it's a big downfall. And you know what I think contributed to it, Via? You always talk about this, that what's the word you use all the time? Just an uncontrolled pursuit of more, right?
Undisciplined pursuit of more.
Yes, undisciplined pursuit of more. And you've seen teams do that. But I think I love having this conversation. We're starting to have a conversation that we're driven, that growth on teams is going to be driven by a desire to deliver on consumer needs and not that undisciplined pursuit of more, where it's just more recruiting and anything goes. So I'm excited about that.
I love that. And I couldn't agree more. Speaking of conversations, we have a lot that I want to still dive into on this topic. I know that we talked about this a little bit in our prep. Should teams be valued and have the same valuation as brokerages now? I think that's a really interesting topic that I want us to continue talking about. And I want to kind of dive down a little bit on the different models we're seeing, on the pros and cons of this, and how brokerages are or are not, adapting to teams. So I'm really excited to go into the workshop and kind of do a little bit more of a deep dive on this, and frankly, to hear what everyone else is thinking about teams and to kind of respond to that. So we'll see you guys in the workshop in a little bit.
All right, welcome back. My goodness. Okay, it was that like just enough. I know I was like ready for more. Where are we going? Via, as always, led a fabulous really taste of the conversation. So make sure you join Via right after our general session, and she's going to kick off the afternoon of workshops and masterminds. And I saw her jumping in on the chat, so she's going to be ready to take your live questions and conversations. I loved John Knox asked a great question. Are teams just mini brokerages? What are we talking about here, right? Do we just go back in time and our teams are operating as mini brokerages? And I think we heard some of that in there, right? I think Adelina gave great perspective that the teams have an ability to disrupt in a different way because they can really spend time honing in on that value proposition and what differentiates that in the marketplace. And I loved what Wilson talked about this repetition, the same way we experience at the doctor's office, right? If our doctor's off and they're in a big practice, there's somebody else that can step right in. And while we know that like our clients love us and we provide this really unique value, at the end of the day, when they want to see a house or write an offer, like it often is in the now, and teams often provide that back end support that allows our clients' needs to be met at the highest level. So I don't know, that was just a great get started, and we're going to keep that conversation rolling. So if you had more questions or if you've got thoughts on that discussion and debate on the future of teams, there's more coming to you with Via this afternoon. So up next, we have Clelia, Christian, and Anne for our next section. But first, we have a really special segment on what does the stimulus mean for the real estate industry. Beyond these $1,400 payments to individuals that make less than $75,000 or families making more than the $150,000, how is this act, right, gonna impact us? So we've got Rebney's Ryan Monell with a quick overview, and then we're going to have all of some additional details that'll also be posted on the replay later today. So I love that we were able to just pop this in there real time. So we're going to turn it over to Ryan.
Hello, I'm Ryan Monell, Director of City Legislative Affairs for the Real Estate Board of New York. Fortunately, the latest stimulus allocates $21.7 billion more for unemployment assistance and pandemic unemployment assistance for 1099 independent contractors, including brokers. The legislation extends the supplemental UI/PUA program benefit through September 6, 2021, which adds $300 more on top of the base benefit calculated off of 1099 or W-2. As anticipated, $25 billion has been allocated to establish an emergency federal residential rental assistance program to be distributed by state and local governments. In addition, $575 million has been established for mortgage and utility assistance for homeowners. And perhaps most importantly, while the legislation noticeably does not establish a federal commercial rent relief program, new funding streams have been established for some of the hardest hit industries. This includes $28.6 billion for restaurants, $15 billion for additional EIDL grants, $3 billion for economic development grants, including for tourism and travel, and $1.25 billion for hard-hit independent live venues.
Thank you so much. I am so delighted to be here today talking to Anne and Christian about what's happening in the mortgage market and the different ways their companies are approaching servicing customers in this environment. So maybe we can kick off just by talking about what a crazy time it's been in the mortgage market. I know that it's been a period of, almost unprecedented levels of activity, both in the new origination and refinancing markets. Maybe, each of you can share a little bit about what you think's been driving this and how sustainable you think it is.
Of course, go ahead, Anne.
Okay, yeah, great. So yeah, I almost want to say happy anniversary, because I remember tomorrow is like the first day where we got shelter in place, and I can't believe it's been a whole year and everything that it's driven. So, what I would say is it has been quite a year on every level, and it almost seems trivial to focus on refinance with all else that's been going on. But I will say, refinance activity was huge in 2020. I believe the Mortgage Bankers Association estimated it to be as high as 1.7 trillion, and that's trillion with a T. It's amazing, and it certainly remains strong now as we're approaching the end of the first quarter of 2021. So just looking at the MBA, which is always generally a good guide. They say that rates will average about 3.3% in 2021. So the refinance boom should slow potentially dramatically by the second half here. But it won't close entirely. Their estimates are that 20 million Americans actually may still have rates over 4%. Hard to believe with the amount of media and from every level of attention on that. So it should slow somewhat. But refinance isn't just about rates. It's also about people reassessing their living space and potentially pulling money out to improve their space where they've been spending a lot more time and had a lot more time to think about it. And also potentially improving their property for sale as well. So it's not just about a lower rate, but it's about clients' other, hopes and dreams as well.
Those are great points, Anne. She's definitely right. It's been a crazy year, and I'm with you. I can't believe it's actually been a year since we've all been sheltering in place. Last year was definitely a ride. I'll have to just say it was. I don't think any of us went this time last year expected for us to have such a refinance boom. Rates obviously played a huge part in everything. It allowed people to make some adjustments. And I think for a lot of people, they had to make an adjustment is, do we move? Do we stay? If we stay, should we cash out and actually really work on our home, which we saw a substantial increase in cash outs, very different than it was in the early 2000s, but definitely something, like they're thinking of, do I want to do an addition? Do I want to change some things? Because this is going to be their home. The places where people lived wasn't just a place to live anymore. It became people's offices. It became their gym. It became, their whole social life became inside four walls, if you look at it that way. And people make some big changes in thoughts on that. I know also, early on, not just refinance, but it also brought a kind of a newfound to the purchase, who's purchasing homes nowadays, where are they purchasing homes? All of those played such a big part last year. People were thinking, how can I afford this? How can I not? And if you think about it, rates are, yes, they're great for refinance, but they're great to purchase a home. And so the purchasing power just even expanded for people that they never thought they could own something, but now because of the rate levels, they were able to own something. So last year, I think just for the whole home ownership was just an exciting year for everybody. Sad for personal reasons and health reasons, but exciting in the home industry for sure.
Yeah, and it certainly is remarkable. I mean, I think none of us exactly a year ago thought that this was what was coming, right?
It seemed, I kept thinking this is a last for a week. This is, it's going to be like flu season. It's just going to be here and it's going to get sunny outside and it's going to go. And it didn't. It continued on, which I think, as we looked at the home industry, it basically kind of halted for a little while there. If you think about it, nobody could see homes the way that they viewed homes. And then we had to adjust, agents had to adjust. They had to figure out, how can I FaceTime my clients because they don't want to go into a home? How can you walk through and get 3D videos to be able to see through a home? So everybody had to make some adjustments. And I think it was really, I think we all grew from it in certain ways.
Yeah. Grew and advanced. I think I look at now how we're doing things, and it's almost like a 3 to 4 year advance on technologies, not just people were sort of forced into digital technology, right? Into applying online because they weren't going to walk in and talk to someone. And, it's interesting. They got in, they tried it, and they like it. I mean, that's been amazing. I think one other thing that I noticed as well is that, given the economic hardships, it's almost, we've, really seen a strong focus on affordable home ownership, right? Because that's really top of mind to assist those first-time home buyers and those low to moderate income families in those communities as well. And I think that's been a big part of it. We expanded our down payment grant program and really saw a lot more interest in our down payment assistance. And I know that's true of all lenders. And that's just so important because we don't want the dream of homeownership to go away just because, people feel like, they might be more limited. I think the credit challenges that we discussed as well, the sort of the buy box, if you will, all lenders are responsible for ensuring that people can sustain, home ownership long term. And then, guidelines shrunk a little bit, contracted a little bit because of the environment. But now that they're open back up again, I think there is a lot of interest in, affordable and also still in moving, but also still in refinancing, all of the above.
So, we talked a little bit about rates. We're touching a little bit on who, though I think we can go into more detail with that. But I did want to also touch on where people are buying and these interesting shifts, and what has sort of motivated some of the shifts. And we were talking about this briefly before we started to record, that, there have been these meaningful shifts and where you are seeing buying activity. Maybe you can both talk about that a little bit.
Yes, that's a great question. And I think, when everything started happening, a lot of people decided in some of the major cities to kind of like, let's run, let's scatter, you heard everything, especially like in New York where we were located, a lot of people trying to move out to the suburbs, going to Connecticut. Which those were kind of the immediate, but we're really starting to see, I would call them kind of like a secondary major market. So where somebody was going to Denver before, they're now looking at Colorado Springs, they're looking at like Ann Arbor. Two of those cities both have colleges in there that focus on engineering. And so you're kind of like getting this kind of new engineering focus on those areas. Some other great points, people from California, they love the outdoors, but California is not necessarily where they want to be today. So they're looking at cities like Austin. They're also the ones going to Colorado. We're really seeing a lot. The Northeast, a lot from the Northeast is going down to Florida. I've seen a huge boom in Florida. So, some of the locations, I'm also starting to see where I'll use Austin as a really good example. The cost of living in Austin has started to go up. It was kind of a real popular market in 2020. Now you're looking in 2021, you're starting to see like San Antonio is now starting to be that kind of a city. Some of the smaller areas, I would love it personally if some of it was kind of a revamp and a revitalization for even smaller cities, or even towns that can become cities again that had a kind of a dying bit. But now that everybody's working from home and making some adjustments, that maybe we can see some of that regeneration come through. I think will be really kind of a fun, but that's really kind of where we're seeing it. And a lot of it's not just millennials either. Millennials are definitely the first time home buyer. We're seeing a lot of different people that are moving of all ages. People want to get closer to their families. If they lived in one city because of their job, but now they can live wherever they want, they can move closer to their families and be there and be that support system. Because, for me personally, I haven't seen my family in a year. And, because they're too far and I can't, couldn't travel to be able to see them. And so, I'd love it if I was in the same city so I could still see my family during this time. So hopefully soon.
So true. Really well said. I think initially, as you touched on, the utter devastation in New York that was so top of news, and that focus on city and what we saw, to your point, Florida, Connecticut, Long Island, wherever people had a second home, basically they fled. And I think then when you add, employers making decisions that, work from home or working anywhere would be not all of them, but many, and that drove choices as well. But to your point, what we've seen is also looking holistically, not only at home value and, you know, the size of what I can get, but looking at things like where don't I have to pay state taxes? What are the property taxes like here? We have a very unique property tax, which I won't go into in California, but it's we have a unique property tax benefit actually in California, but then our state taxes are higher. And so looking around at those states, but also I think you brought up a very good point that people are looking at family connections too. And really there's that craving to be closer to family and maybe making a joint decision with other family members, but then school prices, how, you know, people are homeschooling. Some people actually, you know, you hear people who don't like homeschooling. There are a lot of people who have decided that they really do like it. And so they're rethinking everything. It's so many different layers that come into that where do I live decision. Also, I think where they are in their life, right? If they're closer to retirement or if they're first-time homebuyers, really making that really good first choice, but more holistically on and just with so many different factors involved now.
Yeah. I think another really interesting thing was that, you know, there had been this media story of almost like, oh, maybe millennials don't care about buying a home. And then part of what we've seen in this period is actually as, you know, as rates have come down, as people are now thinking about places outside of these very expensive, dense urban areas, we're seeing a big bump in millennials engaging in the home buying process. So I'm curious, you know, any interesting trends either of you have seen there?
Yeah, you know, it's funny you say previously there was a lot of, you know, talk in regards to millennials not wanting. They wanted to be able to kind of up and lift. If they couldn't fit it into their car, they own too much. You know, they wanted that freedom and the luxury to be able to, you know, move. And also, you know, they also aren't staying with the same company for a long period of time. So they can move. They can go from California to New York to Austin. They had that flexibility. But I think through last year, they've all realized, okay, that's all and great. But however, I need to build my own roots. Like I want my own house, you know, living in an apartment wasn't something that was something that they really were wanting to do, but they all financially, you know, now it's affordable to be able to do. I needed more space than this small little apartment. Maybe it's not so bad to have a few more things, you know, to be able, especially board games. I think during last year, I think most of us, I've played more board games than I've ever wanted to for sure. But I think they really just made a decision that, you know, owning something is going to be important. It was a good financial situation for them, and they wanted to be able to stay. You know, having that flexibility and the freedom wasn't something that necessarily was as important as family was and friends.
Yeah, we do. Bank of America does a Homebuyer Insights report every year. It's great. It's all these questions like what motivates people. We actually ask and we go to different areas of the country to get kind of broad. And we found that 89% are still motivated to purchase their first home. And I think, and even, you know, a chunk of them are really ready to accelerate for all the reasons you cited. Absolutely. I think there are, you know, a couple of things. First of all, rent costs are still high. They've come down in some areas, so it'll be interesting, especially in those urban areas. It'll be very interesting to see if that impacts it this year. But rent costs are still pretty high. But some of the other hurdles with millennials, high student debt. They cite that as, you know, how they feel that something that will impact their ability to not only save, but be able to afford, you know, but getting pre-approved is important. It's very interesting right now. Now that it's so easy to get a pre-approval, fully underwritten pre-approval, you know, digitally online, we're seeing a lot of pre-approvals right now. I think what's holding us back a little bit is, you know, inventory. And hopefully what we'll see as we, you know, go into spring, and gosh, we're days away from spring, which is hard to believe. But, you know, it'll be interesting to see if that inventory kind of opens up. I do think the environment really felt restrictive for people who wanted to sell their home. Number one, they needed, you know, a lot of people feel the need, and realtors were advised that to kind of do some fixing up. And it was very restrictive whether you wanted, you know, painters to come in, or even if painters could come in, you know, whether you really felt comfortable with that. So, you know, I think maybe some of that lifting will maybe drive some of the inventory, but remains to be seen. We're hopeful.
Yeah, the inventory is definitely an issue right now. And so, appraisals and everything else that goes along with it is definitely going to be a challenge when we go into spring. So spring is going to have a lot. I know we all talk about purchase season, and purchase season is among us. It started earlier this year than I think normal. So I think it's exciting for all.
Yeah, I think people in the industry feel like the purchase season almost hasn't stopped, depending on where you are, right? That it's more geographic than it is seasonal this year, right?
Agree. Yeah, it always was like summertime, but I think it's. I don't even know if there has been a purchase season for a while.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's just ongoing. It's great.
Yeah. And I want to wrap up just with a bit of a kind of what's the future of the mortgage industry? What do we feel like is coming? Obviously, having Bank of America, which has been one of the leaders in providing mortgage services for many, many years, and Better, which I think is seen as kind of like one of the upstart companies coming into the space. How do we think things are moving? Do we think that we're going to move towards, for everyone, a more digital process? Do we think that pre-approvals kind of across the board are the future? What are the innovations that you think we've seen as a result of COVID that are going to really stick with us?
I think
go ahead.
For Better.com, obviously, we've always been a socially distanced mortgage company. It is definitely, technology is one of the things that has really helped us, and it drives us to be able to there. I think it's going to continue. I think that you're going to see even more technology come into the whole home ownership journey. I think it's going to be something that's going to be exciting as we go through 2021 and 2022, not just because of COVID. I mean, think about how the realtors have been reacting to showing homes. I think that's just going to be a part of it. Technology is here, and it's going to have to come down to how quickly, people have enjoyed how fast they can get responses, how quickly they can get things done. And so I think the speed is going to be something that's going to be continued. And it's also the ease. I mean, how great is it to sit in your living room and you're filling out your application for your mortgage online. You'll be able to get your docs online. You're no longer having to go get into your filing cabinet and go pull all the documents. You're able to do everything right there. And by midnight, you can, have a lender estimate coming to you, and so I think that people want that sense of quickness and ease to everything.
I agree. I think we sort of saw forced broad adoption in many ways. So if we look back to 2019, we had 36% of our mortgage applications come in digitally, and in 2020 it was 68. So pretty incredible. Probably a 3 to 4 year acceleration in and obviously during that time also our digital team, and I'm sure every other digital team, was working to even further accelerate that. It's like, now we've got them, now how do we hold them, and what else, what other value can we add? And it doesn't mean that a person is being taken out of it, because I think what we want is for if you can enter on our application, for example, on our app, you go in and enter 10 to 12 fields, and it populates 100. And so it's a huge, to your point, huge time saver. It's more accurate. There's a lot we know, so why not pre-populate that for you? But it also then allows whomever you might be working with to really add more personalization that matters, right? Rather than, taking in a bunch of data, it's more important to really, get that data easily, but then provide your, personally tailored, timely, relevant advice that isn't data driven. So it's a mix of sort of high tech and high touch. But I do think, to your point, I know our digital application is, we do have, I think most of I think everyone knows that the industry now went from a 3 or 4 page application to a 12 to 14 page application. And really, I don't think there's a client on the planet that wants to sit with us for 2.5 hours getting data that we can get very easily. I think they'd rather talk about rates, terms, potentially down payment grants, and other, relevant guidance rather than that data. And so I think that's really accelerated, and it's also help them migrate to other data, digital solutions as well in conjunction with that. So it's been quite advanced. I think where the opportunity is really that back end. and really working with the investors, the GSEs, et cetera, on really what will be accepted in terms of that back end, which, for the client, maybe that's not where they interact quite as much, but it's important for the industry, and it's important in terms of saving time. And I know this is relevant for realtors. They want to close the loan. And so really automating that part and getting all on the same page on that, I think, is really the next step. And I think that we'll see some acceleration there as well.
Yeah, I agree. And, we saw it a lot, think about even when you're going to closing, everything, you have your mobile notaries, drive-by appraisals, desktop appraisals, there's just a lot of where the things can move quickly through the process. So it'll be really exciting to see the changes.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I agree. And I want to thank you both so much. This was such a rich conversation. So I'm looking forward to continuing it. And I'm really grateful that you both joined us for this update on where we are today. Thank you.
Thank you for having us, Anne. It was a pleasure to meet you.
Yes, same here. Thank you guys so much. Appreciate it.
First off, I already think I'm extremely lucky because I'm half Irish. When I think about the big milestones in my life that I've achieved, definitely I can say luck was a huge part. When I got into real estate, the market crashed, but I saw an opportunity. And what I did was I represented these portfolios with a lot of different properties where myself and my team, we were listing and selling over 1,000 homes a year. And I saw there's gotta be a better way to be more efficient. There's gotta be a better way to be more compliant. There's gotta be a better way to serve my clients. That's what SkySlip is today, a digital transaction management platform. And I would not have been able to do that if I did not have all those properties on scale. See, we built this 100% because it was hard to manage transactions at scale. And so again, another opportunity I saw, and I got lucky building it. And here we are today, serving hundreds of thousands of agents, doing millions of transactions, all based upon, I'd say, being at the right time, at the right place, with the right solution, which I call luck.
Renee, what an action-packed morning.
Speaking of lucky, how lucky are we all to be a part of this general session? I literally have pages. I have 4 pages of notes, and this has been one of my favorite general sessions of every Connect Now. What about you, Kimber?
Absolutely. I mean, I was just looking back at my notes and I'm like, okay, what were the key takeaways? What did I hear? And I think, the theme was around efficiency, right? It started with Pete, right? We heard it even more from Wilson. We just heard it in the mortgage side of efficiency of operations. How are we leveraging technology to make us more efficient in what we do every day?
When Pete kicked us off, he really launched us into those conversations around efficiencies and change. And I really think that as an industry, we need to continue to allow a little bit of that fear out of the driver's seat when we affiliate it with change, because there can be such promise, such innovation around the change. And it's really refreshing to hear an entire general session morning of all different leaders talking about where change is going to create improvements and how it will allow us to work smarter rather than harder for the consumer.
Absolutely. You nailed it. I mean, and what I love is this is just the beginning of a conversation. We've got more on the schedule, right? Via is going to continue us this afternoon. We've got more Inman Connect Now events that are coming up every single month, right? So we've got another one April 20th. We've got it back virtually June 15th through the 17th. And then where are we going?
Oh my goodness, that's it. Everybody brace yourselves. We are going to Vegas for not 1, but 2. Remember, we have Luxury Connect in Las Vegas. That's going to be taking place on October 25th. And then we also have the one and only Inman Connect in Las Vegas going on through the 29th of October. Be sure to check out inman.com/events. And like Kimber and I said earlier, we're going to be there early. We're going to be there with bells on. Little bit excited, Kimber.
Just a bit. So So you can find us. I know both of us will be happy to connect with you guys. Both of us. I'm Kimber, I think at Kimber Minkiti on Instagram. Renee, yours is just Renee_Funk, right?
That is right. Renee_Funk on Instagram. And I've been incredibly fortunate and lucky to share time with you, Kimber, today. Thank you, because you're a pro and you made this very, very simple for this girl.
I love it. We had a good time. So it was great to see all of you, to hear all of your comments in the chat. And we look forward to seeing you at another Inman event soon.
I'm heading over to Via's segment now.
Make
it a great day.
Thanks.
Thank
Bye.
you, Inman community. Bye, everyone.